Hey, it's Dustin again with Life Changing Belief. I just recently uploaded a video on God's law, and I wanted to do a part 2 on that to go a little bit more in depth. So, I mentioned last time that God's law can be found in the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, but it's also scattered throughout all of Scripture. With God's law, a lot of times it can be overwhelming. You see, just in the New Testament, there are over 1,000 commandments. New Testament alone. And Jesus commands us as part of the Great Commission, not only to make disciples, but to teach them to observe whatsoever I have commanded you. That's a lot of commandments. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. But you see, God's law is common law. Common law is the idea that a previous court decision or a previous law is used in the process of a new court decision or new law. It is building upon what has already happened and what has already been commanded. God's law functions the exact same. God's law functions that whatever is previously commanded is what the new law or the new commandment is built on. So these 1,000 commandments can actually be summarized into the 613 commandments of the Torah. You see, in Jewish culture, it was common that by the time that a child turned 12, he would have memorized all 613 commandments found in the Torah. And this would be celebrated with the bar mitzvah or the bar mitzvah, depending on the gender. And this celebration was to symbolize that this person had memorized and knew the law of God, and that they were responsible for keeping the law of God until they died. It was a ceremony to symbolize that they were now a young man or young woman of God. That's where the bar or bar mitzvah comes from. So these 613 can be a summary of all the commandments in the New Testament. And while that's a little more digestible, that's still a lot of commandments. But thankfully, we're not just left with those 613. You see, those 613 can be summarized into the 10 Commandments. Many of us are familiar with the 10 Commandments. Don't lie, don't steal, don't commit adultery, have no other gods before me, keep the Sabbath holy, honor your mother and father, the first commandment with a promise. These 10 Commandments can be an outflow of 2 even greater commandments. The first 2 commandments, or as Jesus Christ calls them, the greatest commandments. The first is, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. The second is like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself. Upon these 2 commandments hang the whole law and the prophets. Everything is built from this root system of the great tree of God's law. We have these 2 commandments. These are expressed in the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are further expressed in the 613 and the 613 in the New Testament commandments. You see, these are just showing how to apply the previous laws. Deuteronomy is the perfect example of this. Deuteronomy is actually a contract between God and the children of Israel. And it has the terms and conditions within there. And as you read through the book, you realize it is a list of terms and conditions where it will take one of the 10 commandments, and then it will show how does this apply in the real world during their time. So we see they were using that sense of common law to apply God's law. Likewise, we should as well. When we come to a decision, if we don't know the specific commandment as far as what we should do in this situation or what we should do with our life, we should go back to the 10 Commandments. And if these 10 Commandments, maybe you're not too sure which one that it would fall under, you can always go back to the 2 greatest commandments. Does what you're doing help you love God or hurt your relationship with God? Does it help you love your neighbor as yourself, or does it hurt your neighbor? Within a Christian's decision making, we have to take all these into consideration if we want to follow God's law. Last time I read from you the first verse of Psalms 119. That verse talked about how those who follow God's law, who walk in God's law, are blessed. Let us continue to keep His commandments, his two greatest commandments, his 10 commandments, the 613, and all the commandments, so that we can receive that blessing from God. Thank you.